Marshall is now a global enterprise, but it's been a long journey since the days when the first amplifier was built, back in 1962. Memories of those humble beginnings are still strong, as are those of the company's founder, Jim Marshall.
Jim was a great character. He could roll up his sleeves, he could go onto the bench and he could show the people what to do. And he understood the mechanics of the company. And that was Jim. He did everything.
In those early days, the whole Marshall family lent a hand.
Because my father used to do covering, and my mum was gluing up for my dad to do covering.
There was a good team spirit and willingness to make the product work.
When the newly retired Phil Wells joined Marshall in the early 70s, Jim was still a major presence on the factory floor.
When I started all those years ago, Jim used to spend the morning covering in the covering department, and then the afternoon he would do his normal business side of the company.
But Jim's hands-on approach left a tiny problem.
The reason why our units are now signed was because of Jim. Mainly because when he was covering, if one was badly covered, everybody else would blame Jim. So he said, right, from now on, everybody signs a unit. Then whoever's badly covered it, I won't get the blame.
As the company rapidly expanded, Jim enjoyed life at the top. His success not only brought him fame and fortune, but a deep respect from the music industry he loved. The Marshall Empire had been built on Jim's sheer grit and hard work. This single-mindedness probably had its roots in his childhood. As a boy, he had endured years in hospital with a terrible condition called tubercular bones. His father suggested that tap dancing might help strengthen his limbs. It changed his life. Jim found rhythm. It was the era of the big band. The glamour and the energy drew Jim to the drums. He was a natural.
Jim was a really good musician, and he was a fine drummer, and he could also sing, and he would do both at the same time. And he was so good that a lot of students would ask him if he could teach them to play the drums because he was doing such a good job in the dance bands of the era.
In the late 40s, early 50s, I had a following of youngsters everywhere I appeared, and eventually I was being chased to teach. Firstly, I thought I would not like teaching, and I kept saying, no, I'm not interested in being a teacher. But then I gave in to 2 pupils and found that I liked teaching.
Young hopefuls made their way to Jim's drum studio in the front bedroom of his West London home.
I saw an advert for Jim Marshall drum tuition, and he sat me behind a drum kit and said, well, go on, have a go.
And my connection with Jim started, and John Entwistle's started very, very early. We were 12, and we were in a jazz band, and we used to call the Confederates, and our drummer was Chris Sherwin.
Jim's teaching was phenomenal. I thought he was wonderful as a teacher.
Every rehearsal at the end, Chris would close by showing us his latest drum lesson. Chris used to go completely mad. Now, I didn't see that again until Keith Moon walked on the stage, but Chris was doing this, when we were 12.
Taking us to see bands, and particularly the American bands, was just phenomenal. Buddy Rich, Count Basie, Duke Ellington.
I had massive respect for Jim because he knew what was what at that time, and I didn't.
At the most, I had 64 pupils in a week, which meant that was 64 hours teaching a week.
With this newfound teaching income, Jim quit life on the road. His young drum students began to talk about an exciting new American music. In the next episode of Play It Loud, Jim meets rock and roll.